Hello and welcome to our group presentation on effects of sleep deprivation on cognitive performance, working memory, and academic progress, as well as techniques through which these effects can be mitigated. I am Andrew Dowdy.
I'm Ria Bakhtiani.
I'm Joaquin Uriarte.
And I'm Alexa Valentino. We are going to begin with a brief introduction of what we will cover during this presentation. We divided our topic into 4 areas, and each of us investigated one specific area. I will be discussing the effect of sleep deprivation on cognitive performance.
After that, I'll be explaining the effects of sleep deprivation on working memory.
And then I'll go into some of the correlations that have been found between sleep deprivation and poor academic performance.
Finally, I'll be talking about solutions and ways to mitigate these effects of sleep deprivation on cognitive function.
To investigate the effect of sleep deprivation on cognitive performance, I found an expansive study that used 5 different tests to measure cognitive function in participants. These methods used are as follows. All participants received 3 normal nights sleep. On the 4th day, the control group received another normal night's sleep, while the experimental group did not sleep at all and thus were placed into a state of sleep deprivation. After the 4th night, all participants performed 5 tests of cognitive function on the smartphone app called Karolinska Wake App at 3 different times during the day, specifically 8 a.m., 12:30 p.m., and 4:30 p.m. The 5 tests were simple attention, where individuals had to press a button on the lower half of the screen when a message on the upper half of the screen prompted them to. Arithmetic ability, where individuals had to complete simple arithmetic tests. Episodic memory, where individuals were shown a list of 12 words for 12 seconds, then the list disappeared. A second list of 24 words appeared, and individuals had to identify which of the 24 words were present in the original list. Working memory, where individuals were shown a 4x4 grid of blocks and they had to remember the order in which the blocks became red. And finally, the Stroop test, where individuals were shown the name of a color in a font a different color from the meaning of the word. They're asked to say the meaning of the word, not the color that it's written in. I included an example on this slide. The word blue is written in red, and the Stroop test is looking for the individual to answer blue. The general results of these tests showed that individuals in the group that were sleep deprived performed worse on all except the Stroop test compared to the non-sleep deprived group. Additionally, performance declined the later in the day it was, so performance at 8 a.m. was better than performance at 12:30 or 4:30 p.m. Specifically for each test, the simple attention test showed an increase in response time for the sleep deprived group, so these individuals took longer to perform the task than the well-rested group. And you can see this in the figure that I've attached to the bottom of this slide. The response time graph is like all the way on the left. It's graph A. For arithmetic ability, the sleep-deprived group showed an increase in the likelihood to make mistakes. For episodic memory, there was an increase in the likelihood of misremembering words. For working memory, there was an increase in the likelihood of misremembering sequences, and the Stroop test had no noticeable difference between the sleep-deprived and the non-sleep-deprived groups. Thus, the overall conclusion from this study was that there is a negative correlation between sleep deprivation and cognitive function.
So now we're going to be talking about the effects of sleep deprivation on working memory. And to start off, let's define what's the meaning of working memory. So working memory is a system that is used to store and process information and which is a cognitive function with limited capacity. This information can be converted to long-term memory through different memory methods like retelling. Thus, it serves as the bridge of memories going from short-term to long-term while being processed. Currently, plenty of studies have proven that there exists a negative correlation with sleep deprivation and information processing and reaction ability. Most of these studies, however, have concentrated on analyzing working memory by using an N-back working memory paradigm. None have proven an impairment in working memory with electrophysical evidence. Moreover, very few experiments have analyzed working memory with different tasks in the same experiment. Because of this, we're going to analyze the methods and findings of a research article titled "The Effects of Sleep Deprivation on Working Memory Related N2P3 Components," because they concentrated on proving the decrease of working memory functionality using different tasks and electrophysical data. The scientists that led this experiment assigned 3 working memory tasks: pronunciation working memory, spatial working memory, and object working memory, and recorded EEG data in 2 time points, baseline and after 36 hours of total sleep deprivation for each individual task. They gathered 16 healthy, right-handed male students ranging from 21 to 28 years of age. The participants practiced the task until 90% accuracy was achieved. The day before the experiment, the participants slept in the lab. On that morning, they all performed the tasks, and EEG recordings were measured. This served as the baseline data. Afterwards, the participants were not allowed to sleep for 36 hours when the second EEG recording was measured while they performed the same tasks again. Now, for the next slide, the results were analyzed using the following metrics. So on one hand, we have the behavioral data, which include reaction time, correct rate, and correct number per unit time for each individual task. On the other hand, we have the EEG data recordings, which were the amplitude of the P2 and P3 components. For the former, the reaction time, which was much longer in the second recording, where the participants had already undergone 36 hours of total sleep deprivation. In the table, you can see that on the right-hand side, it took them almost 30 minutes more. The correct rate and correct number per unit time also decreased in the second recording of the data. Now, as for the EEG data, the scientists observed a significant decrease in the amplitude of P3 and a significant increase in the amplitude of P2 component. The N2 component, the N2 amplitude also decreased, but not enough to reach statistical significance. Now, the conclusion can also be divided in 2. As for the EEG data, we can conclude that because the P3 wavelength decreased after the total sleep deprivation, it can be concluded that total sleep deprivation lowers one's efficiency and innate mechanisms of attention and decision making. Now, as for the P2 component, the purpose of the P2 wavelength is still widely debated. Some say it represents the process of attention and visual processing and is generally considered to be related to selective attention and working memory. The fact that P2 wavelength increased can be explained by the fact that a functional compensation, which individuals appear to maintain normal cognitive function after total sleep deprivation. Although this is a plausible explanation, the change of P2 components on total sleep deprivation need to be further studied. As for the behavioral data, it can be concluded that there exists a positive correlation with total sleep deprivation and mean reaction time of the cognitive tasks, and then a negative correlation between total sleep deprivation and the accuracy of these same cognitive tasks.
So with these specific ways that sleep deprivation has been shown to impact cognitive performance and working memory, I then looked into the statistical trends between sleep deprivation and academic performance. The first place in which I examined this was pre-college impacts. So one study I looked at, Chen and Chen 2019, looked at a variety of studies and different schools across the country wherein start times had been changed and then tests had been taken both before and after. And they found, the first thing that they found was that making a later start time had beneficial effects on circadian rhythms and reduced sleep deprivation. And they then also found that there was a potential link between an increase in reading and mathematical scores when school start times were changed by an hour or more in some cases. However, this did vary across the various data from across the country. Additionally, we also found various small case studies, which, although not as scientific, suggests that there were typically positive correlations between pushing back school start times, though in these there was much less effort taken to eliminate confounding variables. Then also looked into a study during college. So Roberts 2021 took a very statistical approach and acquired a large amount of data from across the country and examined a large selection of variables to try and model the effects of sleep deprivation on GPA and graduation, while making sure that this was more significant than confounding variables. See on the right some of the data from one of the models they used. So the first thing to say is that they found that students who reported chronic sleep deprivation in their freshman and senior years were 25% less likely to graduate, and that students who reported chronic sleep deprivation solely in their senior year were 40% less likely to graduate. And in addition to this, regardless of whether they modeled the data using a fixed or random model approach, they found a negative correlation between chronic sleep deprivation reported and GPA from the institution. And although this wasn't, the magnitude of this correlation was not particularly high, it was higher than a variety of other factors which we typically think are far more important, such as binge drinking, aerobic exercise, various financial indicators, and amount of time and work put in.
These studies show us that sleep deprivation consistently impairs performance on vigilant attention tasks, but has mixed effects for tasks that measure other aspects of cognition. And more often than not, we end up finding ways which help us ameliorate these detrimental effects of acute sleep deprivation. So to study a few commonly used techniques like caffeine, melatonin, and music, we researched a few studies that help us understand how exactly they affect our nervous system and whether or not they are effective in certain conditions that participants were studied on. So these interventions help us know that sleep deprivation impairs vigilant attention. For some tasks, including a psychomotor control task, however, 24 hours of sleep deprivation also had no effect on performance. So we concluded that the vigilance hypothesis holds that deficits in vigilant attention explains the majority of cognitive performance deficits due to sleep loss. But we saw that some techniques like caffeine should solve all the effects of sleep deprivation, which leads us to another hypothesis called neurophysiological hypothesis that states that the view that sleep deprivation effects are akin to specific neurophysiological deficits in a range of cognitive processes and cannot be solely explained by general attention deficits. The first intervention that we studied was caffeine. The method used was that the participants were randomly divided into 4 groups, and these groups were either sleep deprived or not sleep deprived, and they were either given placebo or caffeine, a dose of caffeine, 400 milligrams. And the activities performed were sleepiness and mood assessments, and also unravel and PVT. PVT stands for psychomotor vigilance task, in which participants monitored a blank computer screen for the appearance of a large red circle in the center of the screen and were instructed to make a mouse click as quickly as possible. And unravel is a task for checking your place-keeping abilities, which actually tests whether or not you can perform certain tasks in a particular fashion, in a particular order. It is an acronym identifying 7 procedural steps which have to be performed one after the other without repetition. Sleep-deprived participants were allowed to read, do homework, watch TV, movies, board games, card games, everything, but just not activities that would activate the autonomic nervous system. Sleep deprivation impaired performance on both tasks. We saw that the sleep deprivation impaired performance on both tasks, but caffeine affected performance selectively. we concluded that caffeine selectively improved visual vigilant attention, but not for the large majority of participants, the cognitive processes required for placekeeping. When we excluded the participants who did not perform well, caffeine did not affect the performance on the unravel task, and we excluded the same number of poorest PVT performers, and caffeine still affected performance on the PVT. Next, we studied melatonin. Melatonin it was given as a supplement that can affect the staging of circadian rhythms, which in turn may affect physiological function. Participants were randomly assigned to 6 different conditions, 3 experimental nights, which is without sleep deprivation, 4 hours of sleep deprivation, and 24 hours of sleep deprivation. And they were either given melatonin or placebo. We saw that perceptual motor speed and hand-eye coordination are the tasks more frequently reported as being influenced by sleep deprivation. They were tested on Stroop test, which Alexa mentioned, where text is supposed to be read as it is and not as the color in which it is written, and also a series of computerized tests that were evaluated by the VNR test systems. The participants were collegiate student athletes, and the conclusion was that melatonin treatment given 30 minutes before training improves reaction time, static and dynamic balance, anaerobic power, and lactic acid in college student athletes who were sleep deprived for either 4 or 24 hours. Next, we moved on to motivational music. The method was that each participant accomplished in random order 8 experimental sessions with a recovery period of 72 hours. That is, this test was conducted over a period of 30 days, and it was either with or without listening to music, and either they had non-sleep nights or they were partially sleep deprived. And this was conducted at 2 TODs, time of days, either in the morning or in the afternoon. They were all given a pre-decided playlist of music, and while they were warming up, and then finally they performed the wing it tests. Then we conducted a test of their saliva sample, where we found out that listening to music lowered post-exercise cortisol in the morning after both PSD and NSN. As you can see on the right, there is a graph displaying the results of the same, and we came to the conclusion that listening to music during warm-up seems to be an effective strategy to counteract the negative effects of PSD on mood, reaction time, attentional capacities, and short-term maximal performance.
So to move on to our overall conclusion, we examined research showing negative correlation between sleep deprivation and cognitive function, variety of impacts of sleep deprivation on working memory, which took both a EEG approach as well as a standard cognitive test approach. And then in addition to this, we looked at statistics showing the impact of sleep deprivation on GPA, graduation, and various other standardized school-related indicators to arrive at an overall initial conclusion that sleep deprivation has a negative effect on all forms and measures of cognitive performance. And then we examined 3 potential solutions or mitigators for sleep deprivation that might improve performance or mitigate the negative impacts on performance, and these were caffeine, motivational music, and melatonin. Now, to conclude, I will briefly show the references for each section of the presentation. However, you can find a complete references document attached to this presentation, as well as a copy of the slides in which the in-text citations and the reference sheets are given. Thank you for listening. Done.
Thank you.
Just a quick review of our reference sheet, because we realized we didn't really go into detail on this. You'll find this document attached, and the references are in order that they were used, and they're obviously in the PowerPoint as well, but these are going to be attached in a separate part of the PowerPoint, in a separate part of the assignment as well. Thank you.